Hey guys, tonight we step into the far eastern edge of the old Byzantine world, where mountains fall into the Black Sea and an ancient empire breathes its final trembling breaths. The year is 1461, and you are walking the stone streets of Trebizond, the last surviving fragment of Byzantium, an island of purple robes and fading glory perched on a cliff between forested peaks and restless waves. It's early morning. Mist rolls down from the Pontic Mountains like spilled milk. The air smells of pine, salt, and cold stone. Fishermen shout from the harbour below, their voices echoing against the steep city walls. You can hear merchants setting up stalls in the bazaar, the clink of coins, the scent of honeycakes drifting through the streets. From a nearby chapel, a deacon chants a slow, haunting hymn that floats over the rooftops. But beneath all this life, you feel a tension, thin as a drawn bowstring. Every conversation drops to a whisper the moment you pass. Every guard on the walls glances nervously toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond the faint haze on the sea, lies a threat so immense the very stones beneath your feet seem to tighten. Because Trebizond is surrounded, the Ottomans have swallowed Constantinople, the Aegean, Serbia, the last strongholds of Anatolia, and now the great Sultan Mehmed II is coming for the final Byzantine remnant. You probably won't survive this, you think, as the wind picks up, carrying with it the metallic smell of coming rain and something else. Change ending. Before the siege begins, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your city and your local time right now, because tonight's story is the final chapter of an empire 1,000 years old. Now take a slow breath. Feel the cold sea breeze. Hear the murmurs of a frightened court inside the Komnenos palace. See the horizon shifting under the early light. Trebizond is about to face its fate, and you're walking straight into the last stand of Byzantium. Alexios IV. Komnenos wakes before dawn most days now, not out of discipline, but out of fear. You can almost feel it as you walk through the palace corridors. The Emperor of Trebizond, last heir of the great Komnenoi, is a man carrying an empire on his back, and the weight is far too heavy. His once brilliant court has shrunk into a circle of nervous nobles, quarrelsome generals, and exhausted advisors. As you pass through the outer courtyard, marbled floors still glistening from last night's mist, you hear whispered arguments from inside the audience hall. Alexios is meeting with his council again, the same desperate debate they've had for months. Sultan Mehmed is consolidating Trabzon province, one minister says. The ports will fall if he brings the fleet, another warns. We cannot fight him, insists a merchant, wringing his hands. We cannot surrender, replies a nobleman, voice shaking. Alexios sits at the centre of it all, his golden robe faded from years of reuse, his crown lighter than the ones his ancestors wore. His eyes dart between speakers, as if searching for a solution that doesn't exist. You stand near the doorway, listening as the walls themselves seem to hold their breath. Trebizond may look serene, perched on a cliff, washed in sun, guarded by mountains and sea, but its stability is an illusion. The empire Alexios inherited is a patchwork of tiny villages, scattered forts and strained alliances. The great days of the Komnenian dynasty are long gone. What remains is a sliver of sovereignty squeezed between Ottomans to the west and Turkmen Emirates to the south, and the cracks are widening. Inside the palace, Alexios' rule is fragile. Outside, it is worse. Local nobles, the Pontic aristocracy, have grown restless. They see the Ottomans growing stronger and wonder whether resisting is brave or suicidal. Some want to negotiate with Mehmed, some want to flee across the sea. Others whisper that Alexios lacks the strength to lead at all. Rumour has it that even in the city barracks, soldiers debate whether the emperor should surrender. Loyalty is fraying. Fear is the new general commanding Trebizond. As Alexios dismisses his council, he steps onto the palace balcony that overlooks the Black Sea. His posture is stiff, robes trailing behind him in the breeze. From here you see what he sees: the city's imposing southern walls, the terraced houses climbing toward the citadel, the glimmering outline of the harbour far below where Genoese traders go about their business, as if doomsday isn't approaching the Genoese, the Venetians, the so-called friends of Trebizond. Their presence is a problem all its own. The Genoese control one corner of the harbour, the Venetians another, They bicker constantly about tariffs, shipping rights, warehouses, taxes. Their rivalries bleed into Trebizond's politics, turning merchants into spies and alliances into traps. You watch a group of Genoese captains walking along the docks, their long cloaks swaying, hands resting on the hilts of daggers for reasons that have nothing to do with Ottoman threats. Every man here has a side, a deal, a price, and Alexios. Alexios has nothing to bargain with. The emperor's treasury is nearly empty. His signature currency, the famous Komnenian hyperpiron, is no longer minted. Tribute payments to the Ottomans grew heavier each year, draining the Byzantine remnant like a bleeding wound. Even the city's famed silk trade is shrinking, threatened by storms at sea and pirates roaming the Black Sea like wolves. As you walk down the steep steps toward the lower quarter, you see the effects of this strain everywhere. Fishermen arguing over docking fees, farmers waiting anxiously to sell grain, artisans debating whether to stay or flee, families whispering at windows about Ottoman armies rumoured to be on the move. Children run through the streets barefoot, but even their laughter stops when the word Mehmed is mentioned. Trebizond is living in the shadow of someone else's empire, a young, unstoppable sultan whose ambition is larger than any map. Mehmed II has already captured Constantinople, crushed rivals in Anatolia, subdued Balkan kingdoms, and built fleets that dominate every coastline he touches. To him, Trebizond is not an equal. Trebizond is unfinished business, a leftover reminder that Byzantium once existed, and Mehmed intends to erase it. You make your way toward the fortified monastery of Hagia Sophia just outside the city walls. The breeze from the Black Sea carries the smell of cedar and wet earth. Monks move quietly through the courtyard, polishing icons, sweeping leaves, murmuring prayers for a divine intervention that feels farther away each day. One elderly monk speaks softly to you as he tends to a flower bed. The emperor dreams of peace. The nobles dream of survival. The merchants dream of profit. But Mehmed, he does not dream. He decides. You feel the truth in his voice. As evening settles, torches flicker to life along Trebizond's massive stone walls. The city still looks formidable. Double fortifications, iron gates, tall towers with views stretching far across the waves. From above, Trebizond seems like a fortress no army could easily take. But walls do not save cities when the will to defend them falters. You glance at the harbour again, watching Genoese ships with half-lowered banners. Are they preparing to leave? To abandon the city at the moment it needs them most? Or to bargain with Mehmed, offering neutrality in exchange for trade privileges? In Trebizond, every ally feels temporary. Every handshake feels like a farewell. And Alexios knows it. He paces the palace halls long after midnight, haunted by decisions he cannot avoid. His authority is questioned, his treasury emptied, his nobles divided, his allies unreliable, his enemies unstoppable. He is a ruler with a crown but no power, a guardian of a dying flame in a storm, and as you stand outside the palace gates, looking at the flicker of torches in the night, one thought whispers through the cold air. This emperor does not command Trebizond. He simply delays its end. Morning light spills across the steep terraces of Trebizond, and with it comes a restless energy you can feel in every street, every courtyard, every shadowed doorway. Because Trebizond isn't just a capital, it's a refuge, a lifeboat, the last patch of purple cloth from a torn imperial tapestry, and everyone who arrives here carries the same haunted look, the same quiet desperation of people who have seen their homes swallowed by Mehmed's unstoppable empire. As you walk through the upper quarter, you see them everywhere. Exiled nobles from Constantinople, scholars who escaped Ottoman rule by slipping onto ships at midnight, monks clutching relics wrapped in worn linen, mothers gripping the hands of children who have never known anything but flight. They cluster along Trebizond's winding streets like driftwood washed ashore after a storm. Some of the refugees still dress in the old Byzantine style, long embroidered tunics, jewelled belts, veils pinned with tiny gold clasps. Once, their clothing signified rank. Now it only marks them as uprooted relics of a vanished world. You pass a small square where two old men argue over bread prices in hushed, frantic tones. One of them fled from Paphlagonia when Mehmed seized Sinop. The other escaped from Constantinople itself, leaving behind a library he curated for 30 years. They argue like brothers now, bonded by shared loss. At a fountain nearby, young men sharpen daggers and speak of revenge. Not because they have a plan, but because revenge is easier to imagine than survival. Trebizond will rise again, one says confidently, though his voice cracks on the word rise. His friends nod, staring at the horizon where Ottoman ships may appear at any moment. You continue downward toward the harbour, where the refugee presence is even more visible. Dozens of families crowd the docks, living under makeshift tents made of sailcloth. They sleep on stacked crates, heat pots over tiny fires, and tell each other stories of the world they left behind. Constantinople's fall 2 decades ago still feels fresh here. Its survivors speak of it with trembling voices, as if saying the city's name might reopen the wound. One elderly woman sits alone on a bench by the water, clutching a cracked icon of the Theotokos. She tells you she once lived near the Blakane Palace and watched Ottoman cannons tear through walls that had stood for 1,000 years. "We thought Trebizond would save us," she whispers. "But now, who will save Trebizond?" A question no one answers. The refugees have transformed the city. Trebizond used to be small but prosperous, a place of gold-threaded silk, bustling docks and quiet monasteries nestled among cypress trees. Now it feels swollen, strained, stretched to its limits. Houses that once held one family now hold 3. Courtyards echo with the cries of babies born in exile. Churches overflow with people seeking comfort, kneeling shoulder to shoulder on cold stone floors. Even the palace kitchens cannot keep up. Giant cauldrons bubble day and night, feeding crowds of hungry mouths with thin stews that smell more of water than meat. And yet, despite the hardship, Trebizond still clings to an extraordinary dignity. You see it in the scholars who gather at the monastery of Panagia Theoskopastos, copying manuscripts by oil lamplight, desperate to preserve whatever fragments of learning the empire can still save. You see it in the exiled aristocrats who dress in their finest worn robes to attend liturgy each Sunday, refusing to let Ottoman victories erase their identity. You see it in the way merchants still haggle passionately over pepper and silk, insisting on normalcy even as they watch the coastline for Ottoman sails. But beneath the surface, fear coils like a sleeping snake. Everyone knows Mehmed is coming. Everyone knows Trebizond cannot resist him alone. Everyone knows this city of refugees is not a sanctuary. It's a last stop. Sometimes, at night, you hear conversations drifting from windows, whispers about escape across the Black Sea, rumours of Genoese ships waiting to evacuate the wealthy, arguments about whether it is nobler to stay or smarter to flee. And then there are the nobles, the proud, stubborn houses of the Pontic Mountains, who wander the streets in their thick cloaks, silver belts glinting. They look at the refugees with suspicion. To them the newcomers are not brothers. They are mouths to feed, liabilities, voices that might sway the emperor towards surrender. The tension between locals and refugees is palpable. Too many people, too little food, too many memories of a world that no longer exists. On the steps of the palace, a group of Constantinopolitan nobles waits for an audience with Alexios IV. They hope to influence policy. Some argue Trebizond must strike alliances with Muscovy. Some plead for a fleet to escort them west. Others demand the emperor negotiate with Mehmed immediately. Their voices rise and fall like waves breaking against the walls. One man, thin, dignified, with a long white beard, tells you he once tutored princes in Constantinople. Now he sleeps in an attic with 3 families and teaches children their letters for food. "This city," he murmurs, "is our ark, but the waters are rising." As you climb back toward the citadel, you see the gilded dome of the palace chapel catching sunlight, glowing like a memory of better days. In the courtyard, Alexios' daughters walk beneath a fig tree, whispering about the newest arrivals. So many noblewomen from fallen cities, so many desperate families seeking favours, so many old ties resurfacing in Trebizond's cramped court. And you understand something poignant. Trebizond isn't just the last Byzantine state. It is the museum of a dying world, a repository of exiles who carry their culture like embers cupped in trembling hands. The city feels full to bursting, full of hope, full of fear, full of memories no army can erase, but memories cannot stop Mehmed. And as the sun dips behind the mountains, you realize the truth that everyone feels but no one speaks aloud. Refugees come here because Trebizond hasn't fallen yet, but Trebizond cannot protect them. Soon they will face their third and final exile. If Trebizond were a quiet, isolated city clinging to the mountains and sea, it might have had a chance to breathe. But Trebizond is not quiet, and certainly not isolated. Its harbour is a buzzing hive of clashing ambitions, and at the centre of that hive are the Italians. The Genoese and the Venetians, those seasoned merchants of the Mediterranean, didn't sail all the way to the Black Sea to admire the view or respect Byzantine tradition. They came for profit. Spice, silk, gems from Persia, timber from the Pontic forests, grain shipments running along the coast. Every crate, every coin, every ship's hull bouncing on the waves has a price tag, and the Italians want all of it. You descend the steep stone paths toward the harbour, where the air is thick with salt and fish and the clamour of dock workers hauling crates. Genoese flags, crimson cross on white, flutter from tall towers built like small fortresses. A short walk away, Venetian banners, gold lion on scarlet, snap angrily in the breeze. Between them lies Trebizond's own customs house, smaller, older, and practically invisible between the towering Italian warehouses. It's almost comical, a Byzantine city overshadowed by its own guests. As you pass the Genoese quarter, two captains stand on the pier arguing loudly in Ligurian dialect. You catch just enough to understand they are furious about Venetian tariff exemptions the emperor granted last month. A Genoese envoy sent to protest still hasn't been given an audience. Alexios IV knows too well how dangerous it is to reject Venice, but he also fears angering Genoa. He cannot please both. He can barely afford to please either. A Venetian galley glides into the harbour next, its long hull slicing the water with arrogant ease. Its arrival sets off a chain reaction. Genoese dock workers shout curses, Venetian sailors laugh. Trebizond's harbour officials look like they'd rather jump into the sea than mediate another dispute. You watch as one Venetian officer deliberately moors his ship just a little too close to the Genoese pier, scraping the edge. A Genoese man lunges toward him, shouting Venetian sailors grab ropes ready for a fight. It takes 3 Trapezuntine guards to shove themselves between the two sides. Not to impose authority, Trebizond barely has any left here, but to prevent bloodshed that could burn the whole harbour. The reality hits you hard. This is Trebizond's international diplomacy. 2 foreign powers fighting in its own backyard. As you walk along the quay, you hear merchants whispering about the looming Ottoman threat. The Genoese captain confides to a colleague, "If Mehmed takes the city, our colony falls, our trade collapses." To which the Venetian replies, "No, if Mehmed takes the city, your colony falls, ours negotiates." And there it is. The truth Venice is already sending quiet signals to the Ottomans. Mehmed II is a man they can do business with. But Genoa fears him. Genoa needs Trebizond alive. You walk past a warehouse where 2 Italian spies, because yes, everyone here is a spy, speak in hushed tones about possible Ottoman naval movements. The Venetians claim Mehmed is preparing a fleet that could appear on the horizon within weeks. The Genoese mutter that they will send reinforcement ships soon, a promise even they don't believe. The city's own harbour master, an exhausted Greek with a thinning beard, approaches you with a sigh. "They're like lions fighting over scraps," he mutters, gesturing to the quarrelling Italians, "and they expect us to clean up after them." He tells you that Genoa and Venice both demand favoured treatment. Lower tariffs, exclusive rights protection, guaranteed docking space, and every demand tears a little more authority away from the emperor. Trebizond's sovereignty is dying not only under Ottoman threat, but under Italian appetite. Higher up the hillside you find the elegant mansions the Genoese and Venetian elites built for themselves. Tall windows, carved stone balconies, painted shutters, homes richer than most of Trebizond's own nobles possess, lavish dinners take place inside. where wine flows and decisions affecting the city's fate are made behind closed doors. The Italians have more gold, more ships, more leverage, and increasingly more control. At the Venetian residence, you overhear a heated conversation through an open window. "If the Ottomans win," one merchant says, "we must be ready to sign favourable terms. Trebizond cannot protect itself." A second replies, "Then let it fall. Venice will adapt. Venice always adapts." Meanwhile, in the Genoese dining hall down the street, another argument brews. "We must pressure the emperor to resist. He has no army to resist with. Then we arm him ourselves. With what money?" Silence. You feel Trebizond tightening between these two forces, like a rope in a tug of war. Later, as you return toward the palace, you witness a scene that perfectly captures the city's predicament. A Greek silk merchant tries to deliver his goods to the imperial storehouse, but two Italian dock supervisors stop him, each claiming their quarter has priority, their tariffs apply, their share must be paid first. The merchant, sweating, clutching his precious cargo, finally sits down on a crate and mutters, "Let the Ottomans come. At least they will make one set of rules." It's bitter, it's painful, but it's real. Thebes, Constantinople, Sinope. Every Byzantine city that fell before Trebizond was weakened not only by external assault, but by internal division. And here, on the Black Sea, that division is sharpened by foreign powers who have no loyalty to Trebizond, only to their profits. As the sky darkens and lanterns flicker to life, you climb back to the upper terraces. From here, the harbour looks peaceful, even beautiful. Ships drifting, waves lapping gently, lanterns glowing like fireflies. But you know what lies beneath the calm. You've walked through the rivalries, the whispered deals, the threats disguised as negotiations, and you realise something chilling. When Mehmed II comes, Trebizond will not face the Ottomans as a united city. It will face them weakened by Genoa, by Venice, and by the slow erosion of its own authority. The empire's last survivors cling to this proud city, but the city itself is being pulled apart before the Ottomans even arrive. The wind coming off the Pontic Mountains is sharp this morning, sharp enough to sting your cheeks, and sharper still in the way it carries the tension of Trebizond's nobility. Because if the Italians in the harbour are one problem, the Pontic aristocrats are another entirely. And unlike the merchants, these men don't just trade goods, they trade loyalty. You make your way up the cobbled path leading to the hilltop estates of the noble families. Their homes perch on terraces like stone eagles' nests, each one wrapped in high walls, iron gates, and courtyards filled with cypress trees. This is the old heart of Pontus, rugged, proud, fiercely independent, and now it's fracturing. Inside one of the larger mansions, voices clash like swords. You slip into the colonnaded hall just in time to hear the argument reach a fever pitch. "We must negotiate with Mehmed," one nobleman growls, slamming his fist on a table carved from walnut. "Tribute has protected us before. We can pay more. We must pay more." Another noble scoffs, tossing his long braided hair over his shoulder. "Coward, if we bend any further, we break. The mountains are strong, and so are we. Trebizond has walls, fortresses, natural defences no other city has." "Yes, well," a third noble says bitterly, "Constantinople had walls too. 15 metres thick. How did that go?" The room erupts again. You move quietly along the edge, observing. These men, Armenians, Laz nobles, old Byzantine families, once held the fate of the Komnenian Empire in their hands. They commanded mountain fortresses, maintained armies of retainers, and collected taxes from valleys carved into mist. Their ancestors rode with emperors. Now, they bicker like men trapped in a collapsing house. The aristocracy is split clean down the middle. Faction 1, the diplomats. These nobles argue Trebizond should bow quickly, pay tribute, send hostages, whatever it takes. They claim Mehmed respects submission more than resistance. You notice their silken robes, heavy rings, well-fed faces. They have far more to lose than the common citizens. To them, surrender means survival, and keeping their estates faction 2. The warriors. These are the landholders from high in the Pontic Mountains. Broad-shouldered, wind-burned, hands scarred from years of sword drills, they believe Trebizond should resist to its last arrow. Many fought Genoese pirates, Turkmen raiders, even earlier Ottoman pushes. They're proud and stubborn, die free, one of them insists, rather than live as the Sultan's servants. The problem is, neither side has enough power to win the argument, but both sides have enough power to sabotage the other. You slip out of the hall as a servant whispers to you. It has been like this for months. They argue, but no one trusts anyone. Outside, you follow the path to another mansion, the home of the powerful Kabazites family. From behind shuttered windows, you hear another tense discussion. A young noble is pleading. The emperor must act, must unite us. Even a weak decision is better than no decision. A weary voice answers, Alexios cannot unite men who do not wish to be united. You continue uphill until you reach a terrace overlooking the entire city. From here, Trebizond seems calm. The sparkling sea, terraced houses, the citadel rising proudly. You almost forget that behind every facade is fear. Suddenly you hear footsteps. A noblewoman in a deep blue cloak stands beside you, staring out at the waves. Her voice is quiet but firm. The nobles quarrel not because they are strong, but because they are afraid they see the end coming, and each tries to protect his own family. You ask her what she believes will happen. She doesn't hesitate. Mehmed will come, and Trebizond will not stand together when he does. Her words hang in the air like frost. Later, you walk through the mountain villages just outside the city. These people, the rural aristocrats' subjects, see things differently. They sharpen spears, reinforce barricades, prepare caches of food. They whisper about fighting in the valleys, ambushing Ottoman advance troops, dragging the war into the forests. For them, surrender is unthinkable. What is the point of a noble title if you abandon your land? They speak of old Komnenian legends, Alexios I, John II, Manuel I, and hope Trebizond's rulers will show the same fire. But when you mention the nobles meeting in the city, the villagers fall silent. They understand. They've heard the same rumours. Some nobles are secretly sending envoys to the Sultan. Others are hiding gold. A few may even abandon Trebizond the moment the siege begins. Unity is a luxury Trebizond cannot afford, and does not have. By afternoon, the nobles ride down from their mansions and flood the palace courtyard, demanding an audience with Alexios IV. They surround him as he steps onto the steps of the audience hall. Negotiate! Fight! Sue for peace! Call the mountains to arms! Alexios raises his hands, but even his voice wavers. My lords, we must stay united. A bitter laugh rises from the crowd. United? This is a court where even cousins feud, where loyalties twist like vines, where every handshake might hide a dagger. As Alexios retreats back inside, you notice one noble murmur to another. If he waits any longer, we may need to choose a leader who doesn't. A chill rolls through the courtyard. This isn't just division, it's the beginning of betrayal. When night falls, torches flicker in the mountain estates. You watch from a high terrace as groups of nobles move quietly between houses. Private meetings, secret alliances, shadows plotting within shadows. Thebes fell because of faction. Constantinople fell because of betrayal. And Trebizond might fall for both. You close your eyes as the sea breeze grows colder. The nobles are choosing sides, not for the empire, not for the emperor, not for Trebizond, but for themselves. And when Mehmed II arrives, those choices will decide whether Trebizond stands or collapses from the inside before a single Ottoman arrow hits the walls. The sea is strangely calm the morning the rumours begin. Too calm, like the Black Sea itself is holding its breath. Fishermen refuse to launch their boats. Merchants on the docks keep glancing toward the horizon instead of their cargo. Even the gulls seem quieter, circling low but refusing to call out. Then a boy sprinting down the harbour road shatters the silence. "Ships!" he screams, breathless. "Ships to the west! Hundreds!" You hurry to the seawall with half the city at your heels. There, faint as brushstrokes on the horizon, you see dark lines moving across the glittering water. At first it looks like a trick of the morning light, shadows cast by clouds or waves bending in the distance, but then the shapes sharpen. rows of sails, masts, hulls cutting clean paths through the blue. You're witnessing the approach of the Ottoman Black Sea Fleet. Word spreads through Trebizond faster than fire through dry cedar. By the time you reach the upper terraces, bells in every church are ringing. Frantic, desperate, urgent. Women pull children indoors. Merchants slam shutters. Monks gather icons for processions. Everyone knows what this means. Mehmed II isn't sending tribute collectors. He isn't sending scouts. He is sending a naval hammer to strike Trebizond from the sea, while his armies move through the mountains. You climb onto a watchtower overlooking the harbour. A group of soldiers already stands there gripping spears with sweaty palms. The captain mutters a curse under his breath. There must be 40. No, 50. No, more. God help us. But he's wrong. More ships appear every minute. Dozens become scores. Scores become what looks like a floating city. The Ottoman fleet is vast, sleek galleys with rows of oars flashing in sync, heavier transport ships carrying siege materials, archers, and artillery, and swift scouting vessels darting ahead like wolves scouting a kill. A priest beside you whispers a psalm with trembling lips, and then comes the moment you dread. The fleet changes formation. It isn't random, it's deliberate. A clean, precise arc, ships spreading across the horizon like a closing jaw. They intend to surround Trebizond. Down on the docks, the Genoese scramble, their captains shout orders, preparing their own ships, but not to fight, they're preparing to leave. Their loyalty lasts only as long as their trade profits do. If they stay, they'll be trapped. So their warehouses burst with frantic activity. Crates thrown aboard, ropes flung, sails unfurled. A young Trapezuntine sailor shouts at them, "You cannot abandon us." A Genoese officer doesn't even look at him. This is not our war. It's a dagger thrust straight into the city's heart. But Venice? Venice doesn't even pretend. Their ships are already drifting away from the docks, rowing calmly toward the open sea. They intend to meet the Ottomans with raised hands, not raised swords. The people watch, stunned, as the city's supposed allies sail away one by one. By midday, the Ottoman vanguard has reached the coastline directly south of Trebizond. A single galley splits from the formation and approaches slowly, deliberately. Its black flags snap in the rising wind. On its mast hangs a symbol unmistakable even from a distance. The seal of Mehmed the Conqueror. The soldiers on the tower stiffen. One whispers, "He's here." Another replies, "Not him, but his hand." The galley stops just outside bowshot range. Then a crier steps forward on the deck and raises a bronze horn. The sound that blasts across the water is long, cold, metallic, a note that pierces straight through your chest. It is a warning, a declaration, a promise. Below, the city erupts with hurried preparation. Artisans drag carts of stones up to the battlements, soldiers distribute arrows. Blacksmiths hammer spearheads late into the afternoon. Women run water to the walls. Boys carry jars of oil. Priests march through the squares chanting prayers that feel as fragile as candle flames in a storm. On the upper citadel, Alexios IV stands with his council, staring at the fleet with an expression that flickers between despair and disbelief. His court gathers behind him, nobles fidgeting, envoys mumbling, generals arguing in harsh whispers. One advisor says, "We must negotiate now." Another says, "We must call the mountain clans." A third says, "We must surrender." Alexios says nothing. He grips the parapet so tightly his knuckles turn white. Because now the truth is visible to every soul in Trebizond. This is no symbolic threat, no diplomatic gesture. This is a siege fleet, and the Ottomans didn't come alone. By late afternoon, dust clouds rise in the west, the unmistakable sign of Mehmed's land army moving through the valleys, his infantry, his artillery, his engineers, his Sipahi cavalry. Trebizond is about to be hit from both sides. Night falls slowly, but the fear does not. The city glows with torchlight as citizens fortify their homes. Soldiers patrol the walls. The sea shimmers black, reflecting the lanterns of hundreds of Ottoman galleys waiting just beyond the breakers, silent shapes in the dark like predators circling prey. You sit on the steps of a tower, listening to distant drums echo from the enemy fleet. No sound is more terrifying than the quiet that follows Trebizond. Last jewel of Byzantium is surrounded, cut off, alone. The fleet has arrived, the jaws have closed, and soon, very soon, the walls will be tested. The first tremors of the Ottoman land army reach Trebizond long before the soldiers themselves appear. You feel it in the ground, a faint vibration rolling through the valley like the distant footfall of something enormous. Birds burst from the pine forests. Shepherds hurry their flocks toward the city gates. Even the mountain air seems to tighten, as if bracing for an impact that hasn't yet arrived. You make your way to the western battlements where dozens of soldiers lean over the parapets, shading their eyes, scanning the distant slopes. Morning mist clings to the ridges, swirling around the dark shapes of cypress and fir. The silence is eerie, too clean, too empty, until the mist parts and the valley moves, not with animals or carts or villagers, but with men, thousands of them. Ottoman banners unfurl across the landscape, red cloth embroidered with crescents, standards topped with horsehair plumes, ranks of infantry marching with terrifying precision. The sun catches the tips of their spears and turns the valley into a river of glinting light. A veteran beside you exhales sharply. "That's no raiding force," he mutters. "That's an army meant to break kingdoms." He's right. Mehmed II has sent a full field force into the Pontic Mountains, a logistical nightmare, unless you're an emperor who already conquered Constantinople and built roads that bend entire landscapes to his will. And at the centre of that approaching storm are the siege engineers. They march in tight units, dragging wagons loaded with twisted hemp, iron bolts, stacked timber, and polished bronze fittings. These are the builders of Mehmed's greatest weapon, Ottoman artillery. Some in Trebizond hoped the rugged mountains would protect them, that cannons would be too heavy, roads too narrow, slopes too steep. But the sight before you crushes that hope instantly. Mehmed's engineers are carving paths through the forest itself, clearing trees, reinforcing muddy slopes with planks, pulling cannon parts on pack animals. Trebizond's walls, once considered unassailable, suddenly look very mortal. You descend the battlements to follow the news as it ripples through the city. Everywhere you go, you feel a growing panic, soft at first, then faster, sharper, spreading through homes, markets, monasteries. Refugees huddle in doorways, whispering prayers, nobles argue in the streets. Swordsmiths are mobbed by men desperate for blades they can't afford. At the palace, Alexios IV holds an emergency council. You're swept into the chamber with clerks, soldiers and nobles all speaking at once. They've taken the lower passes. They captured the mountain fort at Kerasus. 2 lords have fled already. We must fortify the upper citadel. No, we must negotiate. Alexios slams his palm onto the table. We must hold, he says, but his voice trembles ever so slightly. Trebizond's walls have stood for centuries, a general steps forward, not against Mehmed's cannons. An uncomfortable silence follows. Everyone knows what Ottoman artillery can do. They saw the drawings. They heard the stories from Constantinople. Mehmed doesn't besiege cities, he dismantles them. You leave the palace and head toward the outer defences. Trebizond soldiers struggle to reinforce the walls with sandbags and timber. Children carry sling stones to the armories. Monks bring holy water to sprinkle along the ramparts, but the enemy is coming too fast. By midday, scouts report that the Ottomans have captured the Zagana Pass, the last major barrier between the western valleys and Trebizond. That news spreads through the city like wildfire. Men grip their weapons tighter. Women board up windows. The markets empty as every family gathers supplies. Then, in the late afternoon, the first enemy outriders appear. Ottoman cavalry sweeping across the foothills like black shadows, signalling with flags to the main force. Thebes' fall had cavalry shadows. Constantinople's fall had cannon thunder. Trebizond has both. By evening, the main army reaches the outskirts. You watch from a northern tower as thousands of soldiers set up camp with astonishing efficiency. Tents snap open, fire pits flare. Cannon crews assemble frames while carpenters hammer stakes into the ground. The valley glitters with firelight, hundreds of small flames moving between rows of tents like stars reflected on water. And then, in the gathering dusk, you hear it, the thunk of something heavy being lowered to the ground, a deep metallic groan, followed by the unmistakable click of iron bolts sliding into place. The Ottomans are assembling their cannons, right there, within range of Trebizond's walls. Soldiers on the battlements stiffen. A nervous whisper runs along the ramparts like a shiver. Artillery. God preserve us. They brought great guns. Below, the engineers erect wooden mantlets to shield the cannon crews. Teams unload barrels of powder, heavy shot, coils of fuse. You see bronze cannon mouths reflecting torchlight, some small, some monstrously large. And farther back, behind a cluster of red tents, stands a dark silhouette on horseback. No one dares say it aloud, but everyone knows Mehmed II is here. The night spreads across the valley like ink. Torches burn along the enemy lines, outlining the vastness of the force arrayed against Trebizond. From the walls, the city's defenders watch in silence, each man alone with his fear. Deep into the night, drums rumble from the Ottoman camp, slow, rhythmic, unhurried. A sound that says, "We have time, we have numbers, we will break you." You grip the cold stone of the battlements as the wind whips across the sea. The city below lies in uneasy shadow, every rooftop bracing for what tomorrow brings you. Close your eyes. The drums continue, the cannons wait. The siege has begun, not with a single shot, but with the arrival of doom itself. The first Ottoman cannon shot does not come at dawn. It comes before dawn, in the coldest, darkest moment of night, when even the bravest defenders drift into uneasy half-sleep. You're standing on the northern battlements, wrapped in a damp cloak, staring into the black sea of tents below. Torches flicker. Drums throb softly. The air tastes like smoke and dew and dread. Then, a flash, a roar, a blast that shakes the stones beneath your feet. Boom! The first cannonball slams into Trebizond's outer wall. Stone cracks. Dust explodes. Men stumble back, coughing. The siege has officially begun. The Ottomans fire again. Boom! Then again. Boom! Boom! The sound rolls across the cliffs like thunder trying to tear the world in half. Trebizond's walls, old, proud, carved from the mountain itself, shudder under each impact. Small chunks crumble, tiles fall, birds scatter from the ramparts, and the defenders, who once believed these walls were unbreakable, now watch them bruise and fracture like bone under a hammer. Below, in the Ottoman camp, cannon crews work like a machine, loading, aiming, firing with lethal precision. Engineers adjust wooden frames to compensate for the steep slope, driving wedges into the earth, recalibrating shot angles with frightening skill. At sunrise, Mehmed's infantry marches closer, forming ranks at the base of the hill. Shields gleam, spears rise. Their presence is not a charge, it's pressure, a reminder that when the walls break, they will be the first through the breach. Inside the city, panic ripples like cracks in plaster. Mothers drag children into cellars. Merchants nail shutters shut. Refugees flood the churches, kneeling on cold stone floors, whispering prayers that grow more desperate with every cannon blast. In the palace, Alexios IV convenes his war council. You slip in with the crowd. Soldiers, clerks, bishops, nobles crowding the hall like frightened birds. The emperor looks older than he did yesterday. Lines deepen under his eyes. His crown seems heavier. Their artillery is too close, a general reports. We must sortie, says another. We'll be slaughtered in the open, counters a nobler monk steps forward. We must trust in God. A soldier mutters, God didn't stop Constantinople's walls from falling. Silence follows. A silence everyone hears, but no one answers. Alexios tries to speak, but his voice falters. This is the empire his ancestors built, and he's watching it unravel stone by stone. The council dissolves into arguments. Some demand negotiations, some demand resistance, some quietly slip out to consider their own options. You leave the palace and hurry toward the southern walls. There, the damage is even worse. A massive section of outer masonry has cracked open, scattering rubble across the hillside. Crews rush to patch the breach with timber and sandbags, but each patch crumbles under the next wave of cannon fire. A young defender shouts over the noise, "They're aiming for the weak joints," and he's right. They know exactly where to hit. Someone inside the city is feeding the Ottomans information. By midday, Mehmed's fleet moves into position along the coastline galley's anchor, in an arc that blocks Trebizond's harbour completely. Siege towers stand ready on their decks. Archers line the rails. You can almost hear the scrape of arrows being drawn from quivers. Trebizond is encircled. Sea, land, sky. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. At noon, the cannons change rhythm, firing faster, harder, aimed higher. Massive cracks zigzag across the main wall. Dust fills the air like fog. A tower collapses with a sound like a mountain dying. Men dive aside as rubble cascades down in deadly waterfalls. Inside the city, the panic becomes raw. People scream as stones crash through roofs. Horses bolt. Fires start from falling embers. Priests carry icons through the streets, chanting louder and louder to drown out the artillery. The defenders fight hard, harder than anyone expected. Archers line the ramparts, firing arrow after arrow into Ottoman ranks. Ballistae launch bolts the size of spears. Women carry water buckets and stones to the battlements. Boys climb ladders with bags of sand. But the truth is clear. They are fighting courage with bare hands against iron. Late afternoon brings the worst blow yet. A cannonball slams into the citadel wall, the inner wall, the one no enemy has ever touched. A deep groan echoes through the stones, cracks spider across its surface, and for the first time Trebizond's defenders look at each other with silent terror. If that wall falls, the city is finished. As sunset stains the sky blood red, Mehmed's camp erupts in a roar of triumph. They've breached another tower. Night falls in a burning red haze, but the siege does not slow. Mehmed's army fights like an empire that never sleeps. Torches flare across the valley, lighting shapes that move with terrifying discipline. Cannon crews reloading, sappers advancing, shield-bearers forming up for night assaults. Trebizond's defenders stand on trembling walls, silhouettes against the fireglow, gripping spears with blistered hands. You stand among them, breath fogging in the cold air as the last colours drain from the sky. The mountains are black shadows. The sea glimmers like an ink-dark mirror beneath the crescent moon. For a moment, there is silence. A terrible, expectant silence. Then the Ottomans strike again. Thoom! A cannon blast tears through the night. Crack, crash. A section of wall near the southern towers collapses, spilling stone into the ravine below. Screams echo. Dust rises like smoke from a kiln. "Reinforce the breach," an officer shouts, but his voice wavers. Too many breaches. Too few men defenders rush forward with beams, sandbags, planks, anything they can carry. One man hauls a door torn from his own home. Two boys drag a wooden shrine. An elderly mason pulls up stones with hands that shake. But each patch is destroyed within minutes. This is not a siege anymore. This is slow annihilation. Ottoman archers push forward under shields, firing flaming arrows that streak through the air like falling stars. They arc over the walls and slam into rooftops across the city. A wooden house erupts in flame. Another. Then another. The smoke spirals upward, black against the moon. Below, you hear the rhythmic pounding of drums, slow, steady, inevitable. It is the sound of an empire tightening its fist. Inside Trebizond, chaos spreads like fire through dry reed. Families rush through the streets with their possessions tied in cloth bundles. Priests carry holy relics to the citadel. Mothers herd children into cellars as burning debris rains down. Refugees from the upper terraces scream as flames engulf their makeshift shelters. In the palace, Alexios IV is pacing again, pacing as if movement alone could change fate. When you enter the audience hall, you see nobles arguing with a desperation that shreds any illusion of unity. "We must sue for terms. The Sultan will show no mercy. We can escape by sea. The harbour is blocked. Appeal to Genoa! Genoa has abandoned us. Alexios slams his staff against the floor. Enough! Silence falls, but it's not respect, it's fear. The emperor looks hollow. His robes hang loosely on his shoulders. His face is pale, drawn tight by sleepless nights and crushing dread. He isn't ruling Trebizond anymore, he's grieving it. You leave the palace just as another blast shakes the ground. The citadel trembles. A tower collapses near the monastery of Theoskopastos, sending a cloud of stone shards down the hillside. Defenders scream. Bells ring, monks scatter, and still the cannons fire, over and over, like the beating of a colossal iron heart. Near the western wall, you find soldiers gathered around a small breach, where Ottoman sappers creep forward under mantlets, digging, tunnelling, trying to undermine the foundations. A young defender throws a torch over the edge and screams, "Back, devils!" Arrows reply instantly, thudding into the battlements. The boy falls, clutching his chest. His blood runs down the stone steps like spilled wine. You and another soldier drag him away, but he's already cold. Across the wall, morale crumbles. You can feel it. Men who fought bravely now tremble. Some stare blankly at the Ottoman camp, the vast ocean of tents, the torches, the banners, as if watching the end of the world. A veteran beside you mutters, "The walls won't last another day." He's right. Cracks zigzag across every surface. Towers lean precariously. Stones rain down with each blast. Then something horrifying happens. An enormous cannon, larger than any fired before, booms from the Ottoman line. The blast is so powerful you feel it in your teeth. The ball slams into the citadel's outer wall and bursts through. An entire section caves inward. Dust erupts in a massive plume. Screams rip across the terraces. You taste grit in your mouth and stumble as the ground shakes beneath your feet. A breach. A real breach. Wide enough for an army. Trumpets blare from the Ottoman lines. Drums thunder. Thousands of soldiers surge forward. Defenders abandon their positions and sprint toward the citadel, shouting, "They're coming! To the inner walls! Fall back!" The people of Trebizond stampede toward the upper terraces. Soldiers, refugees, nobles, priests. Everyone running, stumbling, screaming as the Ottomans charge. It's chaos. Absolute chaos. But the Ottomans don't enter the breach, not yet. Mehmed orders them to halt, to wait, to watch. He wants Trebizond to see its fate. He wants the city to break from terror, not just force. As darkness deepens, the army withdraws slightly, forming a ring of iron around the broken city, but the message is clear. Tomorrow, they will come through the breach, and Trebizond will not stop them. You stand on the trembling wall, breath ragged, heart pounding, staring at the ruin spreading below tonight. There is no hope, only fear, only the slow crumble of stone and spirit. And you know, the final hour of Byzantium is close, very close. The sun rises over Trebizond with a cruel softness, pink light spilling across broken battlements, cracked towers, and smoke curling upward from the ruins below. It should be beautiful. It should bring warmth. But this morning the sunlight feels like judgment, like the heavens themselves are watching the last Byzantine city bleed out on its mountain throne. You stand on the inner citadel wall, where exhausted defenders slump against merlons, their armour dented, their eyes hollow. Some haven't slept in 2 days, others haven't eaten in nearly as long. Everyone keeps glancing toward the breach below, where rubble lies like a wound carved into the city's flank. The Ottomans haven't attacked yet. That's what makes it terrifying. The enemy army sits in silence across the valley. Rows of tents, banners limp in the morning air, galleys anchored like dark teeth along the coastline. The cannons stand ready, their bronze mouths aimed at Trebizond like the gaze of an unblinking predator. But nothing moves, nothing fires, nothing advances. It is not mercy, it is strategy. Mehmed II wants Trebizond to surrender without wasting his men, or his time. The breach is open, the walls are ruined, the defenders are broken, the city is encircled. All he needs now is panic, and he gets it. As the first true daylight touches the rooftops, A wave of unrest ripples through the lower quarters. Refugees burst into the streets, carrying bundles of clothes and icons, desperate to flee somewhere, anywhere. But there is nowhere left to run. Soldiers try to calm them, but they shout back, "The Ottomans are coming! The breach won't hold. We must flee to the mountains. They'll slaughter us all." A younger soldier grabs your arm. "We can't hold them. You know it. I know it. The Emperor knows it." His voice breaks. "We need terms. We need surrender." And he isn't wrong. The people know it. The defenders know it. Even the walls know it, leaning inward like tired old men ready to collapse. You push through the chaos toward the palace, where the Emperor has summoned his council yet again. The courtyard is packed. Nobles, generals, monks, merchants, soldiers, all talking at once, all terrified. Alexios IV emerges from the hall, pale and trembling. His golden robe hangs loosely on his thin frame. He raises his hands, but his voice barely carries above the crowd. "My people, my lords, Trebizond cannot endure another assault." The courtyard falls silent, harsh, breathless, expectant silence. "We must consider diplomacy," Alexios says, and the words hit the gathering like a stone dropped into still water. The nobles explode into arguments. The monks shout prayers. The merchants call for negotiations. The generals beg for more time. Some of the Pontic lords outright accuse others of betrayal. You want surrender because you've been negotiating secretly. And you want resistance because your estates lie in the mountains. Coward. Traitor! Alexios stumbles backward as the hall devolves into the worst kind of council, one made of fear, not duty. When you force your way outside, you see the people gathering in the agora, staring toward the breach. The gap in the wall glows red from reflected sunrise. Dust still drifts lazily in the air. It looks like a doorway into another world, one filled with fire and steel. Children cling to their mothers. Old men sit with heads bowed. Priests hold icons aloft, and everyone waits for the next cannon shot, waits for the next assault, waits for the Ottomans to march through the breach. Hours pass. The silence grows heavier. Finally drums sound from the Ottoman camp. Not the frantic rhythm of charge, a calculated, steady beat. 3 Ottoman riders appear on the slope outside the breach. One carries a white flag, gasps ripple through the city. Nobles push forward. Alexios himself hurries from the palace veranda. The riders stop within shouting distance. The lead envoy lifts a scroll and reads in Greek, his voice clear and cold. Sultan Mehmed Khan, ruler of the 2 lands and 2 seas, commands the Emperor of Trebizond to submit. Surrender the city, its treasury, and the persons of its nobility. In return, the Sultan offers mercy to the people and safe passage for the Komnenos family. You feel the words stab through every heart on the rampart's mercy. Safe passage, submission. It is the same offer Mehmed made at Constantinople, the same offer that became a trap. Alexios appears on the battlements, robes fluttering. He calls down, "We ask for time." The Ottoman envoy replies without hesitation, "You have one day." Then the riders turn and descend the slope, disappearing into the sea of tents. The city erupts in debate. Some scream for surrender, some demand one last stand. Others fall to their knees, begging God for a miracle that feels impossibly far away. The walls creak ominously. Fresh cracks spread through the masonry, a tower shifts. Even the stone wants surrender. You walk through the city, listening to fragments of conversations that feel like epitaphs. 1,000 years of empire ending here. We trusted the Komnenoi. What now? Will Mehmed keep his word? Does he ever? Night comes again, heavy and starless. The Ottomans light their torches. The ring of fire glows like the edge of a furnace hemming Trebizond in inside churches. Priests chant vigils. In homes, families whisper farewell prayers. On the walls, defenders stare at the breach, knowing they won't survive another bombardment. Alexios spends the night pacing the palace. No sleep, no counsel, just a man bracing to walk into history's jaws. And sometime near dawn, you see it. He stops, lowers his head, and accepts what must come. Tomorrow, Trebizond will choose. Fight to the last drop of blood, or step into the arms of an empire that does not forgive. The final decision hangs in the still air, and the first bird call of morning feels like the beginning of the end. Dawn bleeds slowly over Trebizond, washing the shattered walls and smoke-stained rooftops in a pale, fragile gold. You feel it immediately. The air is heavier today, thicker, as if the city itself knows this is the day its fate will be sealed. There is no cannon fire, no arrows, no drums. The silence is unnatural, almost painful, a silence that settles in your bones like cold water. The Ottomans are waiting, watching, letting Trebizond choose its own manner of death. You make your way through the narrow, winding streets where people have begun gathering in anxious clusters, mothers clutching infants, old men leaning on staffs, young men with spears they have no strength left to lift. Everyone whispers the same thing. Will the Emperor surrender? Will we fight? What will happen to us? The news spreads quickly. Alexios IV has summoned the Council of Trebizond nobles. Generals, merchants, priests and leading citizens file into the palace hall, faces creased with dread. You slip in among them and immediately feel the tension pulsing through the room. Alexios sits on the throne, but he doesn't look like an emperor. He looks like a man torn apart, eyes red, hands trembling. At his left stands the Magus Du, armour dented and soot-stained from the siege. At his right, the Metropolitan of Trebizond clutching a golden cross. The Emperor rises slowly. My friends, my lords, sons of Trebizond, he begins, voice cracking. We stand at the edge of the abyss. No one contradicts him. He continues, our walls are broken. Our people are starving. Our allies have abandoned us. The Sultan offers us terms. If we refuse, tomorrow will bring only slaughter. The room explodes. No surrender, one mountain lord shouts. It is better to die as Romans, cries another. Better to die than be slaves. But others, merchants, older nobles, scholars, shake their heads. Death will not save our families. We cannot defend the breach. Our children deserve life. Arguments ignite like sparks in a dry field. Fight! Surrender! Negotiate! Flee! One noblewoman steps forward, voice firm and steady. If we resist, Mehmed will kill us all. We have seen what happens. We know. Constantinople, Sinop, and Masra, every city that resisted was punished in fire and blood. Silence follows her words. Even the proud mountain lords lower their eyes. The Metropolitan lifts his cross. Our duty is to preserve the flock. A shepherd does not lead his people into hopeless death. Murmurs ripple. The generals look away. Alexios squeezes his eyes shut. Finally, the Magus Du steps forward. We cannot stop them. Our men are exhausted. The walls are gone. The cannons will breach the citadel by noon. I say we surrender, with dignity, if we can. The hall falls into a suffocating hush. Everyone turns toward Alexios. The man whose ancestors once ruled an empire stretching from the Balkans to the Holy Land now holds the fate of a single scarred city in his fragile hands. He whispers, barely audible, I will go to Mehmed. Gasps echo through the chamber. Some weep openly. Others sink to their knees. Some simply stand still, the weight of 1,000 years pressing on their shoulders. But no one protests. The decision has been made, not with shouts, but with silence. You follow the Emperor as he steps out of the palace, draped in his embroidered purple cloak for the last time. He moves through crowds that part around him, people reaching out to touch his sleeves, his hands, the hem of his garment, like they're touching an icon, or a relic, or a dying piece of history. Alexios does not speak, but his eyes gleam with tears he refuses to shed. At the breached wall, a small entourage waits. Clergy, nobles, a handful of guards. Together they descend the slope toward the Ottoman lines, where white banners flutter in the morning breeze. You watch from the battlements as Alexios crosses the final stretch of land still under Trebizond's control. His cloak drags through dust, his crown glints dully. His steps falter just once, only once. before he forces himself onward. The Ottomans stand in perfect formation, rows of spears, shields, and armoured janissaries. At their centre, surrounded by red banners bearing the crescent, sits Mehmed II on a raised dais. His expression is unreadable. His eyes, dark as the sea at night, follow Alexios with cold curiosity. The Emperor of Trebizond stops before him and bows deeply, surrendering his sword. A breathless silence falls over the entire valley. You feel it from the walls, like the air itself is waiting to collapse. Finally Mehmed speaks. His voice is calm, steady, absolute. Trebizond is mine. And with those words, 1,000 years of Byzantine history ends. Alexios kneels. Mehmed places a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that could be mercy or ownership, probably both. The Ottoman banners rise, drums thunder, soldiers cheer, and Trebizond's defenders, exhausted, defeated, lower their heads. The city has chosen surrender. But what Mehmed does next will decide whether it survives. You grip the wall, heart pounding, as the Ottoman army prepares to enter. A millennium of empire is gone, and you are standing on the edge of its last breath. You watch from the battered walls as Alexios rises from his knees and is led gently, almost politely, away from Mehmed's dais. His purple cloak trails behind him like a torn banner. The moment he turns his back on Trebizond, something subtle but enormous shifts in the air. For days the Ottoman army has been a storm pressing against the city, all noise and threat and iron. Now the storm begins to move, slowly, deliberately, into the city. It doesn't begin with a wild charge or chaotic rush. Mehmed does not waste victory with frenzy. He choreographs it. A single banner-bearer advances first, carrying the Sultan's standard, a red field, crescent high, silk rippling in the morning breeze. Behind him, 2 officers walk side by side. Behind them, a unit of disciplined janissaries, armour polished, helmets gleaming, long matchlock guns slung at their shoulders and curved swords at their hips. From the walls you see the gate creak open for the last time under Byzantine control. The heavy iron fittings groan, wood scraping stone, hinges screaming after days of bombardment. Trebizond is not being stormed now. It's being handed over. The first Ottoman soldiers step through the broken portal. Every stone in the city seems to hold its breath. They move slowly, calm, methodical, shields high, weapons ready but not raised. No pillaging yet, no shouting, no wild victory screams, just the sound of boots on stone and banners rustling overhead. Below, in the streets, the people react in a dozen different ways. Some shut their doors and bar them from the inside as if wood could keep an empire out. Some kneel where they stand, praying with eyes squeezed shut. Some peek from behind shutters, desperate to see but terrified to be seen. And some, very few, step back respectfully, hands raised in a silent, resigned greeting to the new rulers. You follow the first Ottoman column from above, moving along the wall walk as they climb the steep road toward the upper city. Their formation doesn't break, not even when they pass terrified children pressed against doorways, or old women making the sign of the cross. This isn't a raid, it's a transfer of ownership. At the main square, the agora where Trebizond once bargained and boasted, Mehmed's officers raise new symbols. The imperial double-headed eagle standard is lowered from its post on the citadel tower, its faded gold thread catching a final glint of sunlight before it folds in on itself. For a brief second, it hangs in the air like a dying breath. Then it disappears from view. In its place, Ottoman banners rise. Red, bold, clean. You'd almost admire the efficiency if it wasn't currently closing the book on 1,000 years of history. From the palace steps, Mehmed enters Trebizond at last. He doesn't ride in like a conqueror in a triumphal painting. No wild rearing horse, no theatrical cape flicking behind him. He rides in steady and controlled, cloak simple, expression unreadable. This isn't a spectacle for him. It's just one more necessary piece on a very big board being moved into position. He dismounts at the palace gate, looks up briefly at the Komnenian crest carved into the stone, and, without a word, steps inside. Just like that, the House of Komnenos becomes a guest room in the House of Osman. Inside the palace, Alexios and his family are gathered in the Great Hall. Wives, daughters, sons, attendants, nobles. Their faces are drawn tight with fear, some trying to maintain dignity, others clearly on the edge of breaking down. Mehmed enters with a small entourage. The entire room drops to its knees, except Alexios, who rises just enough to bow deeply, trembling. The Sultan studies him for a moment, then speaks, not with cruelty, but with total, almost casual authority. "Do not fear," he says. "You have surrendered your city. You and your family will be spared." He grants Alexios a fief in Anatolia, a dignified exile packaged as generosity. He orders that the imperial family be escorted, under guard of course, out of Trebizond in the coming days. The last Byzantine emperor hears his own sentence disguised as mercy. You slip out of the palace to follow the Ottoman wave moving deeper into the city. In the churches, soldiers arrive not with torches but with inventory lists. They take notes on chalices, icons, relics. Some objects will stay, some will go to Istanbul, a few will vanish into personal collections. A priest clutches an icon to his chest, refusing to let go until a commander assures him the church will remain open, as a mosque may rise elsewhere, but not over every altar. In the harbour, the transition is faster. Ottoman officials step into the customs house and begin rewriting everything. Tariffs, shipping rules, port taxes. Genoese captains return cautiously, already negotiating new terms. Venetian merchants appear with expressions that say, "We knew this was coming." The Black Sea trade system is being rewired in real time, and Trebizond's old privileges evaporate like mist over waves. In the streets, discipline holds. Mehmed has given orders. No uncontrolled plunder, no wild massacre. A conquered city is worth more functioning than flattened. There are confiscations, yes. Warehouses emptied, noble homes stripped of treasures, weapons seized, tapestries claimed. But the streets don't run red as they once did in Constantinople. Still, people tremble. Mercy from conquest doesn't feel like kindness. It feels like survival on someone else's terms. On the outer terraces, janissaries plant garrisons in key towers. Gatehouses receive new locks and new commanders. Watch posts overlooking the sea now flash with Ottoman silhouettes. The city's great defensive system, which failed to save Byzantium, will now serve Mehmed, guarding his Black Sea flank. You pass a family sitting in front of their home, father, mother, 3 children and a grandmother. They're not being dragged away, they're not being attacked, they're just sitting, staring. The grandmother turns a komboloi of worn beads through her fingers and murmurs, "First we served the Komnenoi, now we serve the Sultan." She shrugs softly. Stones change banners. People still need bread. It's a simple truth, heavy as granite. By late afternoon, Mehmed emerges briefly onto the palace balcony, a place where Alexios once watched the sea, where Komnenian emperors once greeted their people. Now the Sultan stands there, gazing over the terraced city, the harbour, the mountains, the endless dark water of the Black Sea. From up here, Trebizond doesn't look defeated. It looks useful, strategic, a gem on the northern coast. He has completed the ring around the sea, turned it into almost an internal lake of his empire. The last Byzantine State has become just another province. You walk back to the walls as the sun sinks, casting orange light over the jagged breaches and half-collapsed towers. Ottoman soldiers now share the ramparts with the remaining local guards, pointing out weaknesses, marking repair plans. The stones of Trebizond, loyal to emperors for centuries, will soon be mortar in someone else's story. You rest your hands on the rough, cracked surface, feeling the warmth fading from the stone. Once, these walls defended a proud offshoot of Byzantium. Now they belong to the man who ended it. Behind you, the city hums in a strange new rhythm, half terrified, half relieved, stumbling into the first evening of peace under Ottoman rule. No more cannon fire. No more trembling nights. Just the quiet, unsettling certainty that the old world is gone and a new one has already begun. A banner flaps overhead. You don't need to look to know it's different. Trebizond has fallen. The Ottomans have entered, and the last light of the Byzantine State has been folded into a larger, darker flame. The morning after Mehmed's entry feels strangely quiet. Too quiet, like a city holding its breath after a scream. Trebizond wakes not to cannon fire, not to collapsing walls or fleeing crowds, but to the heavy, unfamiliar rhythm of Ottoman boots on stone. The sun rises over new banners, new guards, new rules, and somewhere within this rearranged world, the last emperor of Trebizond prepares to surrender not just a throne, but his entire life. You make your way toward the palace courtyard where Alexios IV has been summoned again, not as a ruler now, but as a man awaiting instructions. The courtyard is swarming with Ottoman officers, scribes, interpreters, and guards. The Komnenian attendants, once proud and ornamented, now stand in small, tight clusters, reduced to tokens waiting to be placed on a new board. Alexios emerges from the palace doors, looking smaller than he did even yesterday. His ceremonial purple cloak is gone. He wears a simple robe of deep blue, embroidered with faint gold that seems to dim in the morning light. His crown, a symbol of centuries, has been taken into Ottoman custody. He walks with the heavy steps of someone who has spent the night thinking about the meaning of defeat. 2 janissaries escort him past the fountain where Komnenian emperors once blessed city parades. Now its water ripples under the shadows of Ottoman spearheads. As he approaches the courtyard centre, Mehmed's senior officials gather, led by the Grand Vizier Mahmud Pasha. He greets Alexios with an unreadable expression, part courtesy, part calculation. "My lord Alexios," he says in smooth formal Greek, "His Majesty the Sultan requires your full submission and cooperation in the transfer of the city." Alexios bows deeply. "I am at the Sultan's command." The vizier nods. "Good. Then you will accompany us to the Sultan's encampment to formalize your surrender and receive your new fief." A collective murmur rises. Trebizond's remaining nobles, those not already planning escape, stiffen. Empress Theodora clutches her daughter's hand. Younger courtiers hide their tears behind trembling fans and veils. Alexios's young sons exchange frightened glances. The vizier raises a hand. "Your family will follow shortly. You will not be harmed. His Majesty has promised protection." Protection. A merciful word sharpened with iron edges. The escort forms around Alexios, and you follow as they lead him through streets still strewn with rubble from the bombardment. Citizens watch from corners and windows, some bowing their heads, some clutching icons, some staring blankly at the man who once embodied their hope. A woman whispers, "There goes the last Roman emperor." Another replies bitterly, "No, he is just Alexios now." The procession winds down the steep roads toward the Ottoman camp outside the southern breach. Tents stretch across the valley floor in perfect lines. Geometric, orderly, terrifying in their sheer number. Soldiers file into formations as Alexios approaches. You can hear murmurs ripple through the ranks. When Alexios finally reaches the centre of the camp, Mehmed II stands waiting beneath a crimson pavilion, flanked by commanders and bodyguards. The Sultan looks younger up close, more human somehow, yet his presence radiates force, a gravity that pulls history toward him. Alexios steps forward and kneels, not the way he knelt yesterday, broken, trembling, but with a slow, deliberate grace. A final act of sovereignty over himself. If not his city, Mehmed regards him for a long moment. Then he speaks. "You have surrendered Trebizond," he says in Turkish, the vizier translating. "You have given me what your ancestors held for 200 years. For this, I spare your life." Alexios bows his head. "I thank your Majesty for your mercy." "You will live in my lands," Mehmed continues. "Under my protection, your sons will come with you. Your daughters will join my household, where they will be treated with honour." You feel the shock ripple through Alexios' entourage. Daughters joining the Sultan's household. An honour, yes, but also a sentence written in silk and gold, not stone and iron. A gilded captivity, Alexios' jaw tightens. He manages a tremulous nod. "As your Majesty commands." Mehmed leans forward slightly. "Your city resisted me longer than I expected. For that, I respect you." It is impossible to tell whether he means it. The Sultan gestures toward a tray held by an attendant. On it lies a ceremonial document sealed with the imperial tukra, granting Alexios a small estate in Adrianople, along with a pension. The last emperor signs it with shaking hands. A janissary steps forward and removes the gold sash from Alexios's waist, the final symbol of his authority. Another replaces it with a plain woolen belt, and there it is. A dynasty ended in a single gesture. Alexios stands, bowed but not broken, as Mehmed dismisses him with a flick of his hand. The emperor-turned-exile is escorted back through the Ottoman camp, surrounded by guards who are now not jailers, but escorts to a new life shaped by someone else's empire. You return with him toward the city. The path feels different now, heavier, darker, quieter. Citizens lean from windows strained to see. Some weep, some cross themselves, some turn away. On the palace steps, Alexios' family rushes to meet him. His wife Theodora embraces him with desperate relief, though she knows the truth. He has come back only to leave again. The Grand Vizier steps forward. Prepare yourselves. You will depart tomorrow. Tomorrow? So soon? After centuries of Komnenian rule, the dynasty has less than a day to depart its own city. That night, Trebizond is strangely quiet. The fires in the Ottoman camp flicker like red stars across the valley, and the city's old torches burn out one by one. You walk through the darkened streets where whispers float through doorways. They're leaving. The Komnenoi are leaving. What will happen to us now? When you return to the palace courtyard, Alexios is standing alone beneath a fig tree, looking out over the moonlit harbour. His shoulders are slumped, his crownless head bowed. His empire reduced to memory, his voice is barely above a whisper when he speaks to no one. We held the mountains, the sea, the roads, but not time. You stand quietly behind him as he breathes a long, trembling sigh. Tomorrow he will leave Trebizond forever. Tonight he is the last emperor and the first exile of a world that has finally irrevocably ended. Trebizond wakes under a different sky the next morning, one that feels lower, heavier, like it's pressing down on rooftops and palace towers. Word spreads quickly through the narrow, winding streets. The Ottomans are taking full control today. Not the symbolic entry of yesterday, not the political ceremony of surrender. Today is occupation. The official, irreversible beginning of Trebizond as an Ottoman city. You walk through the citadel gates at dawn, where a tight column of janissaries marches into position around the palace. Their boots strike the stone in perfect rhythm, an echo that rolls through the city like a drumbeat of inevitability. They carry long spears, curved swords, and matchlocks. Their helmets shine like polished mirrors catching the first pink rays of sunrise. Behind them, Ottoman administrators arrive, scribes, treasurers, architects, surveyors, each carrying leather folders, scrolls, or boxes of seals. These are the men you dread more than the soldiers. Armies break a city. Administrators change it forever. Inside the palace, it has already begun Trebizond's court. Servants hover anxiously as Ottoman officials enter with clean, deliberate movements. The great Komnenian throne, once a symbol of the unbroken lineage of Byzantine emperors, is measured, sketched, and tagged for transport to Istanbul. You watch as it is carried away by 4 soldiers, Alexios' daughter silently crying as she sees the seat where her father once ruled vanish through the archway. The sound of its legs scraping the marble floor feels like a blade drawn slowly across the heart of the city. In the treasury, scribes unroll long inventories. Gold coins, ceremonial armour, jewelled cups, icons, manuscripts. Each object is removed, weighed, recorded, sealed. Some items will stay in the city's churches, but many more are boxed for transport south. Trebizond's history is being gently stolen. You follow the officials into the audience hall where Mehmed stands discussing plans with his commanders. He gestures to the map spread across the Komnenian table. Fortress placements, naval coordination, new tax districts, caravan routes, garrisons, rebuilding the outer walls. The Sultan speaks calmly, confidently, as if he has known this city his whole life. His officers nod in precision. Every sentence rewrites Trebizond's role in the world. This is strategic brilliance, yes, but also the quiet suffocation of everything the city once was. Outside, the occupation unfolds street by street, the military phase. Ottoman soldiers replace local guards at the gates. Signal towers on the cliffs receive new flags. Archers take positions overlooking important crossroads. They are not brutal, not wild, but their presence is overwhelming, like iron vines wrapping around every corner. The people step aside as the ranks pass. They lower their eyes, they whisper prayers. Some curse under their breath. A few, especially the merchants, breathe with visible relief. No more shelling, no more fires, no more starving nights. The administrative phase. Couriers hurry to the customs house, delivering sealed documents bearing Mehmed's tukra. Overnight, taxes change, tariffs change, harbour rights change. Venetian merchants swarm the offices, already smiling, already calculating profits. The Genoese, their quarter is quieter, shadows long on warehouse walls they know they lost. At the marketplace, Ottoman scribes assign new regulations. Some stalls are shut, some are reassigned. Goods once restricted are now taxed. Trebizond's commercial soul is being rewired. The religious phase. At midday, a procession heads toward the great basilica of St. Eugenius. Priests walk before it, faces pale, holding candles that drip wax onto trembling fingers. Behind them march Ottoman officials, carrying scrolls of imperial decree. The bells of St. Eugenius ring not for liturgy, but for transition. Inside, the Sultan's decree is read. The basilica will remain a church, untouched, protected. But other chapels, smaller ones less prominent, will be turned into mosques. Some people sigh with relief. Others feel their hearts twist. You step out into the sunlit courtyard where a group of elderly monks sit beneath a cypress tree, whispering. One of them looks at you with watery, resigned eyes. "We once feared the sea," he murmurs. "Then we feared the mountains. Then the cannons now. We fear being forgotten." His words cling to you as you move through the city. The domestic phase. Families gather outside their homes, waiting for Ottoman officers to assign housing directives. Some wealthy mansions are confiscated. Others are repurposed. A noble's estate on the western terrace becomes a barracks. Another becomes an administrative centre. A third is handed to a high-ranking Janissary commander as reward. Children peek curiously from windows. Dogs bark at unfamiliar soldiers. Women whisper behind doorways. Slowly the city bends. As the day stretches on, you climb to the fortress walls. The breaches remain jagged, raw wounds carved into stone. Ottoman engineers study them, calculating repairs, marking weak points, measuring angles. They speak quietly, almost reverently, as if acknowledging the remarkable endurance of the old walls before they transform them into something new. You look down at the harbour where the Ottoman fleet has reorganised. Carpentry crews hammer on ships, soldiers unload crates, huge barrels of gunpowder roll down planks. The fleet will remain anchored here for weeks, perhaps months, until the city is fully integrated. Trebizond is no longer an empire's last stand, it's a naval base, a Black Sea jewel in the Sultan's crown. As evening settles, you walk through the old gardens of the Komnenian Palace. The fountains have been drained, the mosaics covered, birds roost in the fig trees, oblivious to the empire dying beneath their branches. And there, on a stone bench near the palace gate, you find Empress Theodora, eyes red, hands clasped, a single embroidered cloth beside her. You recognize it, a Komnenian family sigil, hand-woven, faded at the edges. "They gave us until morning," she whispers, not looking up. "To pack, to leave, forever." Her voice trembles once, just once. "My daughters do not understand. My sons pretend to be brave. But the garden smells the same, the sea looks the same, only the world has changed." She looks toward the harbour, toward the Ottoman ships spreading like iron petals across the water. "This city was my children's cradle," she murmurs. "Now it is their prison for one last night." The words settle around you like falling ash night deepens. Torches flicker along the walls. Ottoman guards pace the palace steps. The fate of Trebizond is sealed. Tomorrow the Komnenoi will depart. Today the Ottomans take control, and the city itself hangs in the balance. Neither alive nor dead, neither Byzantine nor fully Ottoman, a ghost suspended between two eras. You stand beneath the stars, watching the flames from the Ottoman camp dance across the valley. Trebizond is no longer falling. It has already fallen. What remains now is the reshaping, the careful, methodical rewriting of its soul. You wake before dawn to the sound of shuffling feet, hushed sobs, and the muted clatter of trunks being closed for the last time. Trebizond is wrapped in a stillness so deep it feels funereal, the kind of quiet that comes not before battle, but before departure. The Komnenoi are leaving today. A pink streak of sunrise glows faintly over the ridge as you make your way to the palace courtyard. There, lanterns sway in the early wind, illuminating a scene that feels impossibly heavy. The last Byzantine imperial family preparing to walk out of their city forever. Alexios stands near the palace gate, surrounded by his children, servants, and a few loyal nobles. Gone are the embroidered robes, the golden sandals, the jewelled collars. The family wears simple travelling clothes, fine enough to honour their status, plain enough to signal humility. Theodora, his wife, tries to adjust the cloak on their youngest son, though her hands tremble so badly she keeps missing the clasp. A daughter clutches a small chest filled with icons wrapped in linen. Another holds a velvet pouch containing the last of the Komnenian jewellery not yet claimed by Ottoman officials. Two guards approach respectfully. "It's time," one says. Alexios nods. He doesn't speak. He barely can. Outside the palace gate, the streets are lined with citizens watching in a silence deeper than any prayer. Some kneel, some weep openly, some simply bow their heads. No one calls out. No one begs them to stay. They all know this departure is not abandonment. It is the price of their survival. The procession begins its slow descent through the city. The family walks. You walk with them. The people watch from doorways, balconies, rooftops, stairways carved into the hillside. A baker sets down a basket of bread and removes his cap as the emperor passes. An old woman crosses herself 3 times, whispering, "Go with God, my emperor." A group of children, too young to understand history but old enough to feel grief, hold hands as their mothers quietly weep behind them. And everywhere, the same sight repeats. Trebizond's people touching their hearts, then reaching their hands toward the departing family. A final, wordless blessing. You reach the lower terraces where the great warehouses once buzzed with Genoese and Venetian activity. Now they stand half empty. Doors open. Soldiers posted at every corner. The Komnenian flag once hung here over silk markets and spice stalls. Today, only the Ottoman crescent flutters in the morning wind. Down at the harbour, a small fleet of ships waits, specially prepared to carry the Komnenoi to their exile in Adrianople. They are guarded not by Trebizond soldiers, but by Ottoman marines standing at rigid attention. Mercy with boundaries, safety with a shadow. Alexios pauses at the edge of the quay. He looks back at his city, the steep terraces, the marble monasteries clinging to cliffs, the golden haze of sunrise reflecting off rooftops, the citadel where his ancestors ruled for generations. This isn't just a farewell, this is a burial. The burial of an empire's final heartbeat. His voice is barely audible when he finally speaks. "I failed them," he whispers. "You step closer. You kept them alive." He gives a soft, broken laugh for now. The family boards the ships one by one. Theodora turns back, tears streaming. Alexios lifts a hand in a trembling half-wave. Their daughters cling to each other. Their sons try and fail to look brave. A young princess presses her hand to the ship's railing, staring at the city with wide, terrified eyes. "Will we ever return?" she whispers. Her brother shakes his head softly. No one needs to answer. As the gangplanks are raised, a gust of wind catches the Sultan's banner above the harbour. The crescent snaps sharply against the sky, replacing Trebizond's double-headed eagle in full, final certainty. The sails unfurl, ropes creak, oars dip, and the ships begin to pull away from the harbour. On the dock, the crowd falls to its knees. A collective cry rises, not wailing, not shouting, but a low mourning hum that vibrates in your bones, a sound of grief older than the walls, older than the city, older than empires themselves. The ships move farther into the Black Sea, white wake trailing behind them like torn threads. Soon they are only silhouettes, then shadows, then faint pinpricks, then nothing. The Komnenoi are gone. Gone from Trebizond, gone from Byzantium, gone from the world stage behind you, an Ottoman officer announces to the remaining locals, "By order of His Majesty, the people of Trebizond will be resettled according to census. Craftsmen and scholars will be escorted to Constantinople in 1 week. Others will depart in phases." A murmur spreads. Resettlement, relocation, absorption. The dismantling continues. You wander through the city as the sun climbs higher, watching as families gather their belongings, as soldiers mark buildings with chalk, as clerks note down names and professions. Trebizond feels less like a city and more like a ledger being slowly rewritten. By afternoon, entire caravans begin forming on the upper road. Hundreds of people from noble houses, guilds and scholarly circles packed together with their belongings. They are not being marched in chains, but they are not free either. Their future lies west in Istanbul, where Mehmed wants them to enrich his new imperial machine. You walk beside one caravan for a while. A scholar cradles a stack of manuscripts tied with twine. A goldsmith carries tools wrapped in cloth. A mother sings softly to a baby in a sling, her voice cracking between verses. One man looks at you and says, "We were Romans yesterday today. We are threads pulled from a tapestry." He isn't wrong. As the sun begins to set, the last of the caravans winds out of Trebizond's gates. The torches of the Ottoman guards flicker as they escort the line down the mountain road. Soon, the citadel's quiet. The streets empty. The old family's gone. You stand alone on a terrace overlooking the Black Sea. The waves roll softly, indifferent, eternal. The breeze carries the faintest echo of children's laughter from the now empty upper quarter. Like ghosts wandering through time, Trebizond is changing shape, changing soul, changing owners. But tonight, watching the last families disappear over the ridge, you understand the real truth. It isn't just Trebizond that has fallen. It's the entire Byzantine world, collapsing into exile, and history has already turned its face toward what comes next. The sun has barely risen when you return to the empty palace terraces, but Trebizond already feels like a different world. Not conquered, rearranged, not destroyed, repurposed. The city no longer breathes with the energy of an empire's last stand. It exhales slowly now, like a tired body surrendering to sleep after weeks of fear and fire. As you walk along the upper walls, the sounds drifting through the air are unlike anything you've heard before in this city. Ottoman cadences echo from drill formations on the cliffs. Muezzins rehearse quiet recitations in courtyards soon to become mosques. Scribes chant lists of names as they finalize the resettlement census. Trebizond's identity is dissolving into something new, and you can feel the transformation under your feet. Not violent, not immediate, but steady, methodical, absolute. Down in the harbour, the shipyards roar with sudden purpose. Ottoman carpenters shout orders as they reinforce docks, unload cargo, and assemble new storage depots. Galleys that once threatened Trebizond now rest peacefully under the protection of the very city they helped destroy. Their sails hang loose, soaking up the warm sea breeze, like they're settling into a long, comfortable stay. Each ship is a reminder. Trebizond is no longer a kingdom, it is a station. A link in Mehmed's expanding chain across the Black Sea. You wander into the market district, once bustling with merchants from Persia, Georgia, and Italy. Today the stalls stand half empty, many shuttered with wooden planks, others stripped bare by departing families. A few local traders linger, rearranging jars of honey or bolts of cloth with dazed expressions. A silversmith sits alone behind his stall, polishing a pendant with slow, careful motions. He looks up at you and forces a weary smile. "We survive," he says quietly. "Trade will return, people will return, but Trebizond..." He gestures sadly to the cracked walls, the unfamiliar flags, the marching soldiers. Trebizond will not return. Past the agora, you climb the winding road towards St. Eugenios. Outside the church, clergy and Ottoman officials negotiate politely but firmly. The church will remain a place of worship, but its treasury is now an inventory, its relics documented, its lands reassigned. Inside, candles burn brightly before the iconostasis. A handful of worshippers kneel, murmuring prayers that echo softly in the high, vaulted space. The chant is beautiful, trembling, determined not to fade. But outside, the world is already shifting to another rhythm. When you step back into the sunlight, the air smells of new mortar and dust as engineers repair the outer walls, not to protect Trebizond from enemies, but to secure it for the empire that now owns it. They gesture, measure, argue, mark stones with chalk. The structure that once symbolized resistance will soon symbolize compliance. Everywhere you walk, layers of the old city peel away. The palace's Komnenian mosaics are being carted off to Istanbul. The nobles' mansions stand quiet, windows shuttered, courtyards overgrown. The refugee districts echo with silence now that their residents are gone. Monasteries pack their last manuscripts, preparing for escort west. What remains in the city are those too poor to leave, too rooted to flee, too entangled with the land to be displaced. They stand in doorways watching soldiers pass, holding their breath at every command, waiting for whatever future Mehmed's administrators decide for them. And yet, beneath all this, life pulses faintly. A boy chases a stray cat through an alley, a woman hangs laundry from a balcony, a fisherman mends his net on the shore. Trebizond is wounded but breathing, broken but not lifeless. You make your way to the very top of the citadel. The air is crisp, the sea a vast mirror stretching into forever, the mountains rolling like stone waves behind the city. This vantage point once belonged to Komnenian emperors surveying their proud domain. Today you stand alone, listening to the soft hum of a city adjusting to its new fate. This is where history bends. This is where the last Byzantine light flickers its final glow. The empire that began in Rome, blossomed in Constantinople, fractured in civil wars, revived in the mountains of Pontus, and persisted through centuries of pressure, has now dissolved into another power's shadow. And yet, as you stand on the walls overlooking the sea, you realize something quietly profound. History doesn't end when cities fall. It lingers, echoes, transforms. The people of Trebizond will carry their memory west. Their scholars will strengthen Istanbul's learning. Their craftsmen will shape Ottoman art. Their daughters and sons will build new futures in new lands. The empire is gone, but its legacy travels with every heartbeat that survives this moment. Take a slow breath now. Let your shoulders loosen. The fires have dimmed, the cannons have fallen silent, and the narrow streets of Trebizond lie washed in the soft gold of early evening. The sea moves gently against the rocks, whispering the same ancient lullaby it carried long before any empire rose along its cliffs. Imagine yourself sitting on the old city wall, the stones warm beneath your palms, the breeze carrying the faint scent of pine and salt. Below you, lanterns flicker in doorways as people return to their quiet routines. A mother lighting a lamp, a fisherman pulling his boat ashore, a few children laughing softly somewhere in the lower terraces. The world feels slower now, calmer. The fear has passed. The noise has faded. What remains is the simple, steady rhythm of life finding its place again. Let your breathing match the slow roll of the waves, in and out, letting the long centuries of struggle drift away with each exhale. The city that once stood as Byzantium's last refuge now rests in a peaceful stillness, its future uncertain but no longer under siege. You sit quietly at its edge, watching the sun dip toward the Black Sea, its light stretching across the water like a soft fading ribbon. The sky deepens to orange, then rose, then the faintest violet. And Trebizond settles into night, a gentler night, a safer night, a night where the echoes of empire soften into memory. Close your eyes now. Listen to the wind whispering through the cypress trees, and let the long story of this ancient city fade into a calm, restful hush. You are safe. The siege is over. Sleep comes easy now. Good night. Sweet dreams.